Hey guys, I'm going to be doing a positioning guide for every unit in set 4. So I'm going to be talking a little fast here because a lot of the stuff is pretty generic and straightforward, but there are small nuances that I'll cover, and I hope you guys can learn something new. But anyway, I'm sorting by cost here, and I'm going to go from 1 cost to 5 cost. So Diana pairs with any frontline. It's usually you play Diana for a loose streak, and you play Diana when you're just trying to pick off a unit. So if you scout and you see someone has like a Nidalee in the corner, you can just put Nidalee or Diana here, and you pair it with like Wukong, Garen, and it can maybe kill off a unit and save you 2 HP. Elise is this is fine. You can do here with a keeper here, with TF here, and the last cultist here is usually Pike. Or you can just do middle, that's fine as well. Fiora, I like to do when you have duelist, I like to put him back because you want to split the aggro here because the duelist actually starts stacking up. So if you have Yasuo like solo tanking, you actually lose out on a lot of the duelist value from the attack speed of it going later on to the fight. Also, Fiora is pretty good assassin bait, so I usually backline him in the Enlighten comps because since jump on her and she can actually repulse and stall an extra 2 seconds. Garen is one of these units that is actually worth scouting. It's almost always solo frontlined, even if you have, let's say, a Wukong. Imagine this is Wukong. You wouldn't really do this because a lot of times they'll clump around both. You want Garen to actually get a max spin value. Garen's one of these champions where if you were to go for a win streak and there's someone that is just as strong as you are, you can actually sweat the positioning on Garen, so it spins around like 3 or 4 frontline, especially strong early game. Lissandra, I like second row corners or second row cubbies, or the cubby down here is fine as well. It's just one of the cubbies to get maximum value from her ult. Maokai, it doesn't really matter. It's just going to be a frontline. Usually you just play with all the brawlers and you just frontline all your brawlers. There's nothing really to be said there. Nami is going to be backline. If I'm playing mage or something, I really like this positioning. It's a really good solo backline because it's kind of like Fiora. She'll definitely auto even if Sins are on her, and she'll just stall the Sins for a while. Nidalee actually does furthest, does damage based on furthest unit, so you want to do one of the corners is fine. Tahm Kench, it's the same as Maokai, there's nothing special. TF, I really like this positioning. Like the cubbies are good. It just gives maximum, like the closer you are to the enemy front line, I would make my front line like hug here, but basically the closer you are, the more chances that your wild cards are gonna spread and hit more units. Vayne doesn't really matter. This unit is kind of bad. I don't even play her, but if you do, it's probably just generic backline. Wukong, it's the same thing, but remember if you pair with Garen, Garen's going to be solo frontlining for spin. Even Wukong backline is fine, especially because of Divine. You can get Divine earlier. Yasuo is going to be, it depends on what items you have in Yasuo. I don't like solo frontline Yasuo because I think Yasuo usually is played as an early game carry, and you can actually backline him and have him carry with duelist. Annie almost solo frontline when it's level 2, but if it's level 1 and you're just pairing it with early game mages, I like to just put it here with like a carry here and another unit here. Her range is perfect here, so she doesn't have to walk up. So third row is fine. Philios is almost always, it's GA Ginsu QSS, and you just put it in the corner. I'll talk about Yuumi positioning later. Hecarim's kind of like Garen. If it's level 2, it'll always ult, and then you want to solo and then have as many people surrounding him. So he does max AoE and max healing. Janna and Enlighten. Janna, I like to have Janna as an assassin bait, so I don't like putting her in the corner. The carry is almost always in the corner, and you can put her here. So usually it would be Janna like in the middle 3 hexes because she can actually take damage and reset her shields like almost infinitely. Jarvan is almost always generic positioning. Double keeper here, carries in the back, and like a frontline here with the keeper value. One of the best Sunfire holders, by the way. Jax, you can actually solo frontline. It's kind of like Hecarim and Garen. Lulu is going to be same as Janna and Fiora, where it can actually tank. And a lot of times, like you can actually screw over non-QSS Katarina with Lulu because it'll spin on Lulu, and Lulu will ult herself and knock up the thing. Pike, a lot of times when you're running cultist, you're going to be running keeper as well. You're probably, a lot of times it's depending on, I think stage 2 I would keep Pike and keeper, but as it gets later and later in the game, I don't think it's worth greeting keeper for Pike. I would almost always put it in a cubby, especially if I'm hugging right side. So a lot of times if you're hugging right side, the units will walk up into your Pike, and the Pike will jump here and ult across the team. That's my favorite Pike positioning. Silas is almost always, you can actually do here, and then you have another frontline here, and usually they clump around here, and Silas walks up here and does like a higher range mana reave. Teemo can actually be second road as a generic backline bait. So if your carry's here, you can do Teemo here because his range is so small. Thresh is one of these units that is really weird. I think late game, imagine these are just like Aatrox Sejuani. You're supposed to put it here, and then if the Sejuani is taking the majority of the hits, the Thresh will always lantern 2 people because it does 1 hex radius with Thresh. So you don't want to you don't really want to spread with Thresh, because if you do this, the Thresh lantern is only going to hit 1 unit, but if you do this, it'll probably hit 2. But if you move them all 3 here, like Thresh here, it'll always hit 2. So you probably want to clump them a little bit. Vi is almost always paired with Ashe. It's same side as Ashe. It would look like this because Ashe is going to attack the same target as Vi, and Vi reduces the armor. Zed, it's same deal as Diana. A lot of times you can pick off a unit with Zed, and also I like Zed middle a lot because it almost always goes to their backline. But if it's RC, you almost always want it middle so it doesn't get stuck on someone's clump. You almost always kill this unit, that's the bait, and then you can finally get the carry, especially with RC because you're running Shade Zed. Akali, same deal as Diana, it's almost always middle. Eve, it's usually almost always middle again. It's honestly all the infiltrators and stuff like that. It's probably Eve, but this is paired with, I would double Keeper the Eve mid-game. It's usually paired with Cultist Keeper. Aurelia solo frontline is fine. I'm going to talk about Lux positioning in a bit. Jinx is generic backline with other units baited to stop the infiltrators, or not the infiltrators, the Shades and the Assassins. Kalista, this unit is honestly just a cultist bot. If you want to carry Kalista, go ahead, but it's almost always here with the 2 keepers here, and it's just going to be a backline bait. Katarina always middle. It has a 2.5 hex alt range, so if you want to do 1, 2, 3, one of these 3 are fine. If you want to turbo sweat scouting, you can do here or here depending on what side they're hugging. Otherwise, here is fine. Kennen, it's almost always second row with Elise front row. That way they clump around Elise and then Kennen gets an ult off. Also, Kennen will not ult unless it has GA. If it has GA, I would just solo frontline, and Kindred is here is fine, here is fine, here is fine. Even here is fine with blue buff. It jumps backwards almost always. Lux, you want a full corner Lux. And then like usually Lux is paired with Enlightened Talon. So a lot of times Lux you want Shen here because what happens is they clump around your Shen, and then Lux will ult from here to this corner over here, and it hits almost all the front line. Nunu, I like to do second row because she can't. But if you have items on Nunu, it's almost always front row because Nunu can actually eat set. Especially when you see someone hugging or doing a solo frontline set, you can do Nunu solo middle because if Ashe is hitting set and then the Nunu is getting targeted by their backline, the Nunu will actually eat set before it can even do setups. So it just completely deletes set. Veigar, it's generic backline position. You don't really carry Veigar right now, but if you were to be in a scenario where you carry Veigar, it's just generic backline. Xin Zhao is almost always just a backline bait. It actually does a decent amount of DPS. Yuumi is usually paired with Aphelios right now. It dashes to furthest unit and gives attack speed. So if you're hugging this side, you always want Yuumi on this side, so it heals itself or it heals the lowest health, and then it dashes to the furthest, which is Aphelios. But if you want to hug Aphelios on the right side, you want to do Yuumi on opposite side of Aphelios. Aatrox, it's usually just generic frontline. I usually always pair it with Cassiopeia. Basically, Aatrox will pull and Cassiopeia will get a better ult. It'll ult almost everything in this little cone. And Aatrox and Cassio are usually played together. Otherwise, you can even do like Aatrox with Kennen. You can do Aatrox here with the Kennen ribbon here, giving him, he pulls people into the ribbon and Kennen AoE. Ahri, it's if you have GA Jewel Gauntlet, basically if you have GA, I'm down here because you can take some splash damage and then Ahri will almost always ult, and with GA it'll almost ult twice. But without GA, I actually just like generic positioning. If it has QSS, you can do here, or you can just go here and try to play another ranged unit here. So it would look like this. That way the Aatrox won't pull Ahri with no QSS, but if it has GA, I don't mind just full corner as well. Ashe is almost always cornered because you're gonna, if your Ashe doesn't have QSS, you're going A. Cassiopeia, it's usually almost frontlined. I like the solo frontline, it's almost like set. Here is fine, or here paired with Aatrox is good. Jhin, generic backline, almost always has QSS in Trap Claw. Morgana, I like to do here, and then I would put, usually Morgana, you're putting Janna here. Imagine this with Janna. Riven, it's usually a keeper. In late game, you don't really care about the keeper buff. It's almost always in between 2 units. So in the comp, it would probably be, you can do like Thresh. Imagine this was Thresh and Aatrox. I don't like Riven getting solo tanked unless it has GA. If it has GA, I'm down to just put it over here and just solo frontline the entire left side. Otherwise, I would have another unit tank the left side and another unit tank the right side. and only have Riven tank like this little line. Johny, it's almost solo front line. Keep in mind that you're probably playing it with Ahri here. So if you're going to play Ahri and they have a set here, you probably don't want Johny here because the set will carry this Johny over here and AoE your whole team. So you can actually just do here and have like Aatrox on this side, like backline Aatrox. So imagine this are Aatrox, and you can do this. That way the set always takes this Johny and brings it nowhere. But it's almost always solo frontline because you're stacking Johny. Shen, again, I like this position because it's usually paired with Lux. Otherwise, it could also be good backline bait, or it's also a good solo frontline. Talon, it's almost always you want to scout and find their weakest player, because Talon is a unit that his ult, how it works is after he kills a unit with his ult, it'll jump to the unit that's doing the most damage. So you actually want him to jump on a weak unit first. And usually the weak units are the baits that are either here or here. So I like to just do middle Talon. But sometimes if their carry is exposed, I'm down to do that. But no one is stupid enough to expose your carry late game. So it's almost always middle for Talon. Warwick, it's just a generic bait. This Warwick like low-key pops off sometimes. But usually when you're playing Ashe, you're just going to put him as like a generic bait. Azir, it's almost always corner. His range is 990, I think, or 890. It's really high. And then the Azir soldiers, let's say these are the two Azir soldiers. A lot of times the Azir soldiers you can actually position to deal with set, but otherwise you can even do backline to deal with assassins and shades, and you can also like hug. Just be careful not to like if let's say you wanna trap it like your Ashe. So let's say your Ashe is in this corner and you're running Azir. Be careful because your frontline has to be on this side. Otherwise, sometimes your frontline will tank here and your Ashe is stuck. But if your frontline is here, their backline will almost always like walk and meet halfway so Ashe can actually attack. But also keep in mind that if your Ashe doesn't have QSS, you can actually put the soldiers like this and then have the generic baits around your Ashe like this. And that way, the Aatrox will always pull Azir and Diana if it's in the middle. And if it's on the hugging the left, it'll always pull Elise and Diana. And if it's on the right, you can probably even put Kindred over here and it'll pull not your Ashe. That's like one way to combat not having QSS on Ashe. That's why Azir is good. Ezreal, keep in mind, Ezreal ults the highest attack speed, but usually you're running Ezreal with Ashe, and it's really annoying to uncorner Ashe, but you could do Ezreal as in a Azir bait as well and do this, but it's almost always here and just say, and just ditch the Ashe value. Use him as a backline bait because his range is really high. Cain, it doesn't really matter, I think. I think Cain's one of those units where you literally just have to scout and you want it to jump on the carries. If it has GA, I'm down to do left and right because it usually gets stuck on clumps. But if it doesn't have GA, I almost always do middle so it doesn't just get focused instantly. Lee Sin, this unit sucks. I would just second row him and pray he goes off. If he has GA, I'm down to first row him. Lilia, I'm down to third row bait. Her range is really low. I think it's 420. It's really low. Or it could be like if most of your carry units are on this side, you just keep her on this side because she almost always casts. So I just keep her as an opposite side assassin bait. Set is solo frontline, so you get him to proc the boss as soon as possible. Yone is in exile, and you just have him solo frontline one side, have him ult and suicide. And Zillion is almost just like Lilia. You just do opposite side assassin and shade bait. Almost always cast unless he gets one shot by, like, let's say a Diana 4 or something. But usually it'll always cast before he dies. That is everything. I hope you learned something new, like such as like the Yumi and Filio stuff. Just a straightforward guide for you guys. I'm out. Peace.